History of Aviation podcast with Derrck Beeler, David Rowe, and David Gorman.
All right. I want to welcome everybody into the History of Aviation podcast. My name is Derrck Beeler, the producer of the show, and as always, I am joined by Mr. Dave Gorman and Mr. David Rowe. It's been a little bit since we put out a podcast, guys. David Rowe.
Yes, it has, but we're here and glad to be back. Good to see you all, and looking forward to talking a little bit about what's actually my favorite airplane.
Oh, good deal. Dave Gorman.
Well, yes, absolutely good to see you guys, and this is one that we've been waiting to do for a little while, and have should have no trouble coming up with plenty of good facts and figures and stories about this remarkable and yet again iconic aircraft of World War II. So looking forward to our discussion, guys.
Definitely. And you guys are the experts on this aircraft, so I'm just going to turn you loose with it.
All right. Well, that's your call, sir. But we'll do the best that we can. Man, I got to tell you, the first time I knew of this plane was I was a very young kid. And my father was in the Marine Corps for a couple of years after World War II, and he was a propeller mechanic, and this was his plane. He came in working on the Corsair, and it was the F4U 4 model the whole time he was there, although he worked on some other aircraft occasionally, but it was this for the Corsair, that was the one that he was specifically attached to. And so seeing it and recognizing that, the connection he had, it just stuck in my mind as, oh, this is cool. Here's something neat that he's got a history with. But then the more I saw it, and there were, a bunch that fly at air shows, this is a common bird that you can see. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's power. It's graceful. It's got that gold wing. It had a 1970s TV show that it was featured in. And so all of those things imprinted this plane upon the minds and hearts and souls of an awful lot of boys in the 70s in the U.S., and I was one of them.
All right. So, yes, I totally agree, Dave, with everything you were saying, particularly the bit about the TV show from the 70s. That, for me, was the reason that this plane became my iconic plane, my favorite plane. Love seeing it. And so if we're going to start a show about a Corsair, then we probably should have a little bit of the theme music from the Baa Baa Black Sheep TV show.
We are poor little lambs who have lost our way.
Back some great memories, boy. And I remember a couple of years ago finding a website that listed the particular aircraft that actually performed in that show. And by that time, I'd learned a lot more about the Corsair and different models and 3-bladed propellers and 4-bladed propellers, all that kind of stuff.
You're right.
And, the cockpit design, all that. And you watch the show now and it's like, those aren't even the same type of Corsair. And I was like, I wish I didn't know so much, but it was awesome to see Corsairs flying formation, and even if the footage was from old movies or different, got reused a lot. It was just awesome because there it was in color once a week on TV. And, I watched that with my dad. It was years later before he told me that, there were some parts of it that didn't quite ring true, for the characterizations and everything. But the plane flying was spectacular. I think Steve Hinton was one of the pilots, wasn't he, Dave?
Yes, he sure was. He's done a lot of movie flying.
Man, so who knew? But just fantastic seeing it. And it just, again, I use the word imprinted because I think it just established such a connection with a lot of people about this plane. And again, there are several of them that are performing regularly nowadays. So it's one that you're liable to see at an air show pretty regularly. We've had some that have flown into Sevierville in the past and visited, and sometimes you'll see them flying on flight radar or ADS-B, flying over Tennessee. But it's such a great plane.
As a matter of fact, I had the Commemorative Air Force's Dixie Wing Corsair stop at Tri-Cities Airport probably 9-10 months ago, just a fuel stop. flew in. I saw it coming, ran to the airport, got a quick video of it as the pilot got back in and started it up and taxied out. So they do come to Tennessee sometimes. You'll catch them here.
Well, they have a great sound, a big motor in the front. And I mentioned about that gull wing. And Dave, I know that you know all about why that design was so important. What made it critical to have the wing design?
Well, it was kind of a double whammy. The Corsair was designed by the Vought Company, and they were trying to use the largest aircraft engine available, which was the R2800, in an aircraft. And to get the most power out of that R2800 Pratt & Whitney, they had to use a 13-foot 4-inch prop. So that's a gigantic prop and engine in the front. And, to get it to fit without having landing gear that were 6 feet long on a carrier, that's just not practical. When you throw that plane down on a carrier deck, if you've got long landing gear, they're going to break. They just can't handle that kind of abuse. So they came up with this ingenious idea to lower the wing, to give it this gull wing shape, to shorten the landing gear, make it sturdier, make it stronger. Another thing was they had to keep this on a carrier, so the wings are going to fold, so they need to keep it short so that it could fit inside the hangars. So you've got two issues there. You've got a big giant engine, big giant prop, slamming it on the carrier deck, and then you got to fold it up and put it into the hangar. So all those reasons, just the gull wing was the perfect answer to all those issues.
It certainly was, and it seemed like the Navy kind of struggled with the early adoption of this aircraft, right? I mean, it was not, they were having some issues with carrier-based operations and it's kind of, everybody's heard the story about landing on a carrier and how they had to really practice, and supposedly the British may have perfected that process. But it was the Marine pilots that really, land-based Marine pilots defending islands in the Pacific, that really helped this plane build its reputation as the fighter pilot's fighter, because they're very successful in air-to-air combat.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The carrier landings, going back to those landing gear, they are, if you look at a picture of them and they're hanging out in the air, they're pretty long. So there was a bit of a bounce. It was hard to get the plane to settle in and land. One of the quotes I read was that it was said on a straight deck carrier that there are only two kinds of landings: a trap and a catastrophe. Ooh. So, there wasn't a lot of options there. So, the bouncing and the inability to see over the nose of the aircraft. It had some nicknames, the hose nose and engine eliminator, widowmaker, things like that, it was, the Navy just wasn't comfortable making it a carrier plane yet. So, right, the Marines got it. They had it for a full year before the Navy finally adopted it, and they put it to really good use. They showed its capabilities really quickly.
Well, the Navy had a pretty good stable of carrier-based fighter aircraft with the Hellcat and the Wildcat. So it wasn't exactly necessary. They were holding their own. The Dauntless was shooting down planes too. I mean, they were holding their own. But the Corsair was fast, right?
That's correct. In one of its first demonstration flights, it was the first aircraft to fly over 400 miles an hour in straight level flight for a piston-engined fighter plane. So, yes, it was very fast. As a matter of fact, I believe the Dash 5 version got up to about 455 miles per hour at its perfect altitude. So, yes, they're quick, fast airplanes.
I read just a quote from a report where they were doing an evaluation of the Hellcat up against an F4U, and the Navy Evaluation Board, who was trying to make some decisions about finally bringing the Corsair into their ranks, I guess, they said, "It is the opinion of the board that generally the F4U is a better fighter, a better bomber, and equally suitable carrier airplane as compared with the F6F. and it is strongly recommended that the carrier fighter and or bomber complements be shifted to the F4U type. So, head to head, middle of the war, as battle tactics were changing, as island hopping, we were really chasing the Japanese across the Pacific, kamikazes. There was a need for speed in the air and packing a punch. But then some of the other missions that this plane began to be adapted for, the ground targeting, bombing, really was. This plane could carry a pretty good bomb load, right?
About 4,000 pounds. It could carry two 1,000-pound bombs on either side of the fuselage. So yes, it could carry some heavy weight.
Well, I heard there was a rather famous pilot who showed that just to kind of show maybe the Marine fighter pilots and the Navy fighter pilots what this thing could do. He launched with 4,000 pounds of bombs and maybe gave them a little boost of confidence that it could be done. You remember that story?
Yeah, I believe that was Lindbergh, wasn't it?
Lindbergh, supposedly he might have flown a few fighter missions, whether it was in this or P-38s, but, it was kind of funny how he was in the middle of the war helping build morale and confidence in those aircraft. So,
yeah, he definitely got around and the pilots all looked up to him, obviously. And if he wants to join in, I'm sure nobody was going to tell him no.
Would you?
No, sir. Not a chance. But
well, it had a lot of success in the air. I mentioned some of the ground attack stuff, but some of the let's see. I was reading about the number of shoot downs that it had. Do you have that handy, Dave?
Oh no, I do not have that. I did not take down a full number.
Gosh, yeah. Let me see here. Well, let's see. Here we go. Well, I must have misplaced it. I know that they say there were 189 lost in World War II in combat, a bunch more shot down by anti-aircraft, but head-to-head with fighter planes, pretty small losses there. They shot down 1,400 enemy planes. That was
okay.
Marine pilots doing that. 1,100 fighters, 300 bombers, and the Marines lost 141 Corsairs. So, they had to feel pretty good about their odds up in the air against. Of course, by that time, we knew a lot about the Zero, that it really was not well protected, built for speed, maneuverability, but not really well protected. So it would light up if you got some good shots into it.
Yeah, I think the military learned pretty quickly that you don't dogfight with the Zero. It's the zoom and climb, attack, get out of the way, come back, attack. Because if you turn with a Zero, it will turn inside you in just a couple of turns and will have be on your tail and shoot you down. So tactics were a huge part of that. Is the Corsair wasn't going to beat it in a turn, so we'll just use the power. We'll, come right up as quick as possible, shoot, get out of the way, and if we don't get you the first time, we'll come back and get you the second.
Absolutely. The Corsair was featured in a major motion picture, as they like to say, recently. Everybody I know went to see it. A lot of people the first day it was out. That movie was called Devotion, about a very famous story from the Korean War.
That's one of the great things. We were talking about how the comparison between the Hellcat and the Corsair, the Corsair was the winner of that competition. Well, because it's such a good aircraft, it made it to Korea. The Hellcat, as soon as the war ended, they stopped making them and they disappeared from frontline units, almost immediately. But the Corsair kept coming.
They became drones, right?
That's exactly right. They were sent up to be shot down.
Yeah, the Corsair was still in active service up into the mid 50s, 56, I think, in the U.S. and the French were flying them, and they had that the AU-1 variant that came out, I think was the last one designed that served in with the French Navy. Is that correct? Or did they have the 7?
Well, correct. The AU1 is actually the F4U-6, and they just renamed it the AU1, and it was meant specifically for the Marines as a ground attack platform. And then the French came along and said, "Well, we want some," and they did a -7 version, and that one was the one that was strictly for the French.
Gotcha.
So they were the last.
There was a plane on the airshow circuit maybe 20 or 30 years ago, a Corsair that was painted as a Aeronaval, the French version, the F7. I never saw it. I saw pictures. And I'm like, oh man, that thing's beautiful. The anchor and the colors, the big yellow stripes on it from the Suez Crisis in 1956 or something like that.
Yep.
Just beautiful plane.
Yeah, well, that's just it. There's a lot of versions to the Corsair, but the majority of them are the dark blue from Korea. Going back to the story of Devotion, where the pilot gets shot down and crashes and is trapped in his plane, and the whole story of his attempted rescue, and that's the Corsair that most people identify with. But yeah, you start looking at the other nations that were involved. The British used it, the French. It was used in Argentina and
New Zealand flew it.
New Zealand flew it. San Salvador, I believe, had it. El Salvador.
It was the famous soccer war from the late 60s, where you had a couple of countries that were up in the air putting Corsairs versus Mustangs, and something that's horrifying to think about now. But
well, in actuality, there was a pilot in a F4U-5, Captain Fernando Soto. He actually shot down 3 Salvadoran Air Force planes, a P-51 and 2 Corsairs. So you actually had Corsair on Corsair action in that soccer war.
That's enough to break your heart. How could you do that?
Yes, it is.
Goodness gracious. Well, we had David and I had a great experience last year up in Michigan, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Thunder Over Michigan decided to have a gathering of Corsairs that was quite the scene. What was it, 13 Corsairs total that showed up?
I think it was 13 different ones, and some were new to me. Some are veterans that you see quite a bit of, but yeah. So to see that many, it looked like a squadron on the field. It was really something. How many did they put up in the air at once?
I believe they had 13 the first day and 12 the second day. I think somebody went home a day early.
But that was just such a thrill to see that many flying, and those guys are not flying at 5,000 feet doing passes. They're coming in and making some dives, and they're rolling and playing a little bit so you can get some good topside views. And thing looks fast just sitting there, and it's cool watching it taxi and fold the wings up or fold the wings down. I can't help but stand behind it sometimes when it's on the ground. You get up close to it and take a picture, looking up over the canopy and the folded wings. Kind of like the picture behind you, Dave. We all have pictures like that, because it just looks great, The other thing about this aircraft, it's got fabric control surfaces on the tail. I think up until the F4U-5, I think that then it was all metal. I may be wrong about that, but
I believe 5 was the first one that they actually moved it to metal, because the -5 was the first one that came out after World War II. So during the war, they were all fabric covered, but afterwards they were all metal.
Yeah. So seeing that and recognizing that you could push a finger through that, it's like it wouldn't be hard to get a bullet through it, of course. Pretty fragile. But man, this thing was built for speed and built for air-to-air superiority. And it's great that there's so many that still can be seen flying around the U.S.
Speaking about those fabric wings, the ailerons, control surfaces, one of the reasons that they were fabric was for just what you said. If a bullet passes through it, it's super easy just to go out and patch it. There's not a lot of effort needed to repair. So that was one of the things that was the reason for using fabric-covered ailerons and rudders. Another thing about it, when Vought was building it, we've been talking about it, how it was sleek and fast, they kind of did a new technique called flush riveting. that was spot welding. And so that's one of the reasons why the plane is so clean, is it doesn't have a lot of rivets and things sticking out. It's super sleek. So yeah, I mean, they're, pretty smart engineers that figured out a way to save a few, miles per hour. The Vault company, they're pretty smart fellas out there.
We're looking at a plane that now is 85 years old from design, basically.
1938.
85 years old, and it still looks great.
Yeah, absolutely. That was interesting. I was reading that the Vault company is the second oldest aviation company next to Boeing, that they've been making aircraft. They're still in business today. They've been bought up by another company called Triumph Aerostructures, but that company still has a Vault aircraft division. So they're still out there actually making something. I'm not sure what, but they're still out there working.
That's incredible. Quite a legacy of aircraft here. So carrier based, a lot of actually all the ones you see nowadays have a tail hook, I think. Not that they use it or anything, but on the carrier, you could stack a bunch of these on the deck with those folding wings, elevators, to bring the aircraft up and down. My dad did a couple of cruises on a escort carrier while in the Marine Corps with his squadron from VMF 225. And he would tell me that there were times when he would get back, the Navy would be coming on board and they would be having some carrier qualifications for some guard units after World War II, and they needed prop guys. And so one time he went out on this escort carrier, the Sea, and he said that this group coming in from Illinois that was going to be doing some landings really struggled. They were out of practice, and the captain of the aircraft carrier turned into the wind for landings. Is that right? But however he turned, the guys are coming in to land, and they were struggling. And this aircraft carrier had a teak deck. And they came in, and a bunch of them came in and didn't turn over, but they came in and dug their prop into the deck a few times. And my dad said they had a stack of teak that was available to repair deck strikes, but that happened on about 5 out of the first 7 planes. And the commander of the ship said, "All right, we're done," and ordered them off his aircraft carrier. And that was it for carrier qualifications for those guys. So it was not easy, even in 1946 or 47. Dad also said that the Navy always had new props. And he said, as a Marine Corps mechanic, that they were, again, he said those 13-foot props, you'd have to balance those. And if you had a strike, you didn't just throw it out and get a new prop. You would have to shave off a little bit. So it might be 12 feet, 4 inches. Each blade, you'd have to balance them all out and shave it to make it so it would, rotate and be balanced. And he said, but whenever his squadron would go on the carrier, since it was a Navy's carrier, they would always grab as many props as they could and put them on their aircraft and leave behind the shaved, shortened propellers for the Navy to deal with. So that was the pecking order in Navy aviation at that time, and probably still is today. Who knows?
Well, yeah, but I'm sure if you're shaving off inches off of those props, that's a performance issue. Your plane doesn't fly as fast as everybody else, and by George, you want the fastest plane you can get. So, yeah, absolutely, I want the best prop on my plane, whatever it takes.
Well, this one is near and dear to all of us, I think, and you were talking a little bit about the paint jobs and the colors, but a few years ago there was a plane that appeared briefly on the air show circuit that was painted up as a AU-1. That was that white one, and the pilot had a accident, I think, on takeoff. Does that sound right, or was he landing? But he put it down out in the Northwest, and the plane was damaged some, but hopefully will fly again. But for a little while, there was just a fantastic looking Corsair that had that that white paint job that was really special. I know some of these have also been used in air races.
Yes, that's true. There was a Goodyear built F2G model that was it was like an Pratt and Whitney 4350 engine, had like 12 banks of cylinders. It's just unbelievably gigantic. Even had they took the turtle deck off the back of the Corsair and put a bubble canopy on it to make it more streamlined. And actually, the reason that this plane was built was because they were looking for fast airplanes to go after the kamikaze. So that's the origin of the aircraft. But after the war, the Reno air races, some pilots said, "Hey, these things are fast. Let's get them out there."
Cook Cleland flew a Super Corsair up in Cleveland in 1947, and that's something that a couple of years ago there were a few of the F2Gs that were on the air show circuit as well. Amazing looking aircraft. So,
oh yeah, I would love to see one. That's one I have not seen in person, and that's one on the list. I got to find one, museum or in the air. Either way, got to find one.
Definitely.
Speaking of colors, there's actually some camouflage versions of the Corsair. The British would fly it, and which is not well known. Usually you think of the Corsair as a Pacific fighter plane, but it was flown by the British in World War II, and they flew them in camouflage, just like you would see a Spitfire. So that same color scheme was put on a Corsair. So they actually used it on a rather famous attack on the German battleship Tirpitz. It was called Operation Tungsten, and they flew the Corsairs off of a couple of British carriers, and they provided fighter cover while the Barracudas were attacking the German battleship. So the Corsair, was not only Pacific; it fought in the European theater of the war as well.
Amazing. And you mentioned a couple of the other countries that flew the Corsair in World War II, and then afterwards, the French flew it in Indochina and in Egypt.
I've got a list here. It's the first Indochina War in 1954, Suez Crisis in 56, Algerian War in 58, Tunisia in 61, and then that soccer war in 1969. So, that plane was flying, almost till the 70s. So, yeah, it's a long life, really long life. Just, when you've got a capable bird and you can, make changes and add and bring on more things. It carried machine guns. It carried cannons. Rockets, exactly. Bombs. Yep. All of those things. It was a night fighter. It was a photo camera reconnaissance. So it was highly adaptable.
Another icon.
Definitely, for sure. Well, guys, is on this episode, number 15, can you believe we're on 15 already?
Wow.
That's crazy.
We're moving right along. But as we're talking about the Corsair, let's get closing thoughts on this, starting with you, Dave Gorman.
I just appreciate the chance once again to talk airplanes with you guys, and hope that folks listening in are learning a few things and not snickering too loudly at things that we're not quite 100% on. We're trying, but this is such a plane that began my love affair with aircraft. I mentioned a couple of episodes ago about seeing a Bronco fly at an air show, and that hooked me big time. But this is the one that was connected me to my dad, and the stories that he had were always, pretty fascinating, and to actually see them and touch them. And he and I went to the Corsair gathering in Indianapolis in 2002, and so I have pictures of him in front of a bunch of the planes, and it was just great to kind of see it through his eyes and watch him run his hand up and down some of the the fuselage or the tail, or just kind of looking at it. And he was back in time. He was 18 or 19 years old, a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps, and that's one thing that I always appreciate about this plane is the connection that he had to it, which meant the connection I had to it. So, thanks for indulging me,
David Rowe.
Well, this is the plane for me. I have a license tag on the front of my vehicle that is an F4U Corsair. I've got models hanging in my basement. I've got remote control Corsair. Well, I've got pictures, paintings. This is the plane for me. Can't, imagine being in spotting and aviation without having, the chance to see this regularly. We were talking about air shows and stuff. The class of 45, Jim Tobel flies one. That's really great to see. He's all over the South. You can see him all the time. The Dixie Wing, the Commemorative Air Force down in Atlanta, they have one. I believe that there's about 45 Corsairs in the U.S. right now. So, they're out there. You can definitely find one either in a museum or flying. So go see them, because once you see them with those bent wings, you can't forget it when you see it and when you hear it.
Definitely another great discussion we had here this afternoon, guys.
Absolutely loved it. Thank you.
Good to be back, and happy spring. How about that? I hate to spring this on David. Just a reminder, I'm going up to Louisville with Bruce and another friend to go see Thunder over Louisville this weekend. So we've got some classic aircraft that'll be in the air, F-86 and P-51, and we're going to get a look at F-22 and an F-35A and an F-35C. So we watch the weather real closely, but looking forward to getting in my first little air show of the season. And Dave, I'll try not to rub it in too much, okay?
Well, I appreciate that. I will be sitting at work, probably in the rain, waiting for a race to happen at Bristol Motor Speedway. So got to go work, so I can't go. Otherwise, I'd be there with you.
Well, and I will say, and Derrick, you probably were going to mention this anyways, about the work David's been doing on some logos for our.
It's looking good.
Hope you guys have seen those online and up on Spotify and other places. They look really good, Dave. You're so talented at that, and
excellent
really
job.
Appreciate the work you're doing on those.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoy doing that kind of stuff. That's what I do for a living. And, so when it's something for me personally, I take a lot of pride in it and try to produce something that's going to look good and be memorable.
Oh, can challenge coins be far behind?
I don't know. Maybe not. A hat, t-shirts, we can really step it up here.
We're definitely going in that direction. Of course, I myself personally had a big move I just went through. So that was the cause for the delay was me. But we're going to get some merchandise out there eventually and have a little merch store, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Can't wait.
Go ahead.
I was saying, I can't wait to see it. It'll be cool to see what we come up with.
Speaking of the challenge coins, I'm going to tell a quick little story here. Since we've been off, we've had NASCAR come to Bristol Motor Speedway. And when you have a NASCAR race, you always hopefully get a flyover. And so this spring for our Food City Dirt Race, we had a MH-53E Sea Dragon from Norfolk come in and do the flyover. And I got to meet the pilot after the race, and he asked me for some decals from the race to put on his helicopter. And since I am the signage person at the Speedway, I got a couple of decals that were extras, gave them to him, and said, "Hey, what time are you guys flying out tomorrow?" And he told me 11 o'clock. So about 10:30, I get a message from him that says, "Hey, here's where we're at. Come, and you can get on the ramp and watch us take off." So nice. I got to spend my Monday at Tri-Cities Airport filming this Sea Dragon, the crew working on it, cutting up, for a couple of hours, just, seeing the men and women, working, but yet having a good time. And they got the helicopter put together, started it up, and took off, got a really great video of the takeoff. But in the process of all this, the pilot gave me a challenge coin for the Sea Dragon. So I've got this really nice MH-53 Sea Dragon challenge coin now. So I'll have to show it to you next time we get together.
And David Rowe, you mentioned filming on the ramp out there. Now, where can folks go find these videos that you filmed and put online?
Aerophile.com, AEROWEPHILE.com. Go check it out. YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. I'm out there everywhere, and I've got lots to see.
And all of our social media for the show is listed down below. We're on Patreon, Instagram, Twitter. We have Facebook. Definitely encourage you to go check out the Patreon program we have, because you can actually go on there and watch how we do this. And when that's put on there, that's non-edited. That's all the goof ups, all the whole 9 yards, plus the video and all that. So,
and there's some goof ups.
Things happen. That's all right. It's real.
Yeah, Dave Gorman, your social media?
I am on social media, and I think my Instagram is _ it's Dave Gorman. So _ it's Dave Gorman, ITS Dave Gorman. I do some stuff on Facebook, but I do have a lot of things, a lot of videos on YouTube. My channel is called Gormania, and it's not all aviation. It's got some other things that interest me, a lot of music, but there are some videos locally and also things from air shows. One of the things I end up doing a lot of, taking pictures at places like Oshkosh, but then when planes taxi by in front of us, I shoot a lot of videos of aircraft coming by and taxiing, and that's always kind of cool to get some unusual types that you see nowhere else. So, but yeah, check that out. Be glad to have a few more views and folks making comments about what you see and asking questions.
Good deal, guys. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you much.
See you again soon.
So for David Rowe, Dave Gorman, I'm Derrck Beeler. Thanks for listening to the History of Aviation podcast.
This is Joe Morse. You are listening to the History of Aviation podcast with Derrck Beeler, David Rowe, and David Gorman.